Okay, welcome to a quick overview. This is week one. We'll be looking at basically chapters 1, 2, and 3. This is just a quick 5-minute look at, and you do need to take a look at the actual notes and the actual PowerPoints, but this will give you a quick framework of what we're hoping to accomplish this first week. Okay, chapter 1 will focus really on 5 central ideas. We'll talk a little bit about the structure of the book chapters. We'll look at sources of American law and how it interacts with business. We'll look at the Uniform Commercial Code and general models. We'll look at jurisprudential schools, and we'll look at how you read a case. So quickly, here are the major topics that we will cover in Course 1. We're going to be, these are not necessarily in order. For example, the contracts will start about chapter 10 or so, 10 or 11. We'll look at torts at this time, agency, some of the rest of these, business organizations and professional liabilities, those actually come later. But these are the major topics that we'll look at in the text, excluding some of the smaller ones. We will discuss in these lectures the structure of the federal constitution as it interacts with business. We'll look at the North Carolina State Constitution just briefly. Then we will turn our attention to statutory law, looking at the United States Code, also looking at North Carolina general statutes, and finally we'll sum up that part of chapter 1 with looking at administrative law, something that's often overlooked, that's really the bulk of the law being made today, things like IRS regulations, Environmental Protection Agency. We'll also in chapter 1 be discussing the creation of the so-called model codes, their antecedents, things like the Lex Mercanta, all the way through the Uniform National Sales Act, the National Sales Act of the turn century, finally with the development of the Uniform Commercial Code, what we'll call, and you'll get sick of this ad nauseum, the UCC. We'll contrast this with alternative systems that exist. We'll kind of finish up the major part of chapter 1 looking at the different schools of jurisprudential thought, such as the natural school, where these things come from, and their application. Finally, there'll be a brief aside at the very end with how we look at cases. Chapter 2 is going to be a quick structural look at the court system. In particular, we will first look at judicial review, a very unique American idea that a court, in particular the Supreme Court of the United States, can declare laws unconstitutional and really kind of thwart what is the elected representatives' ideas, how this developed, how it's applied, how it impacts business. We will discuss jurisdiction, the authority of a court system to hear a case. We'll look at venue, which specific courts hear it, and then give you a differentiation between trial courts and appellate courts. We'll also break down the federal court systems and North Carolina court systems. Here where we'll see some supplemental material that is generally not included in your text. Finally, we'll look at alternatives to trials. This can be pretty important because most things don't go to trial. In particular, we'll quickly look at arbitration and mediation and how they exist in North Carolina. Chapter 3, which will conclude our overview, we'll look at procedures and attorneys, documents, motions, trials, and appeals. So one of the big questions we'll focus is when you sue, what is and is not the basis or what we will call a cause of action for a lawsuit. We'll look at when it's proper to retain an attorney, how rare trials have become, and we'll distinguish between rules of procedure, which really focus on how it's done, and rules of evidence, what's admissible. We will, and I will provide for you some of the documents in a lawsuit, including the complaint and the answer, and how these wind up in the hands of the person suing and the person being sued. We'll talk about motions, evidence, witnesses, when is it really ineffective to sue, or what we will call Punic victories. We definitely will look at the difference between TV trials, what we have a popular image of, and real trials, how they function. And we will kind of conclude with reliefs, injunctive reliefs, court ordering someone to do something, damages, awards, and enforcement. Finally, we'll end our first unit with appeals, matters of law versus matter of fact, and how